My name is Tony Sigrist, and I am the founder and CEO of Talking Freely, which is a local community interest company. And our job, our role, what we do in the community is we create or we start conversations about mental health in community environments, in businesses and in schools. And this video that we're recording today is for East Cambridgeshire's Health and Happiness Day. And we thought what we'd do is try and give a few practical tips on how to have a conversation about mental health. So that would involve giving a little bit of knowledge around what mental health is, the sorts of things that we can look out for in ourselves and other people, and then ultimately some of the places that we can go to for help and support if we feel that we need to. So I'm chatting here. If we're going to have a conversation about talking, I think it's going to work way better if we actually have a conversation. So I'm with Karl from the Countess Free Church, and you also run Ely Food Bank as well, I think. Karl, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tony. Yes, I'm the minister at Countess Free Church here on Chapel Street in the centre of Ely. I'm also the chair of trustees for Ely Food Bank. Ely Food Bank operates across quite a big part of East Cambs. Crucially, it operates in Ely out of the Countess Free Church. Normally, when everything is all physical and tactile, which it isn't at the moment, people would actually physically come to the premises to receive their donations. But traditionally, we've always made an important part of what we do is to say, you know, there's space here, you can come and sit down and have a chat, have a cup of coffee, biscuit, slice of cake. And if you want to talk, talk. If you don't, then that's fine as well. And that's been a big part of the way we operate as a food bank and also as a church.
Cool, thanks. And so, and it's that bit there around people coming and having a chat, because we had a little conversation a while back on the run into an event that Talking Freely were running, which was aimed at job loss. And I remembered you saying to me that that's probably the thing you've missed the most as a result of the last year and the lockdown, was the ability to just sit and talk. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I just don't think we can really ever know the full impact and benefit of just sitting down with someone, sharing, talking. You know, a cup of tea or coffee obviously helps fuel that. But just genuinely asking people, how are you? And I say genuinely asking, so actually being open to have the deeper response rather than the kind of pond skating response of, oh, I'm fine, thank you. No, really, how are you? If you've got something going on, but typically in church or the food bank, we'll say, what's the top thing that is bugging you, has been getting to you in this past week? You know, if you want to tell me about that.
Right.
Yeah, the sheer power of that simple, open, inviting question is huge, and I think is massively important as we think about mental health and well-being as well, because it's the actual interest in the other person. It affirms the person simply by asking the question.
Yeah, really interesting. So, you know, part of the thing with Talking Freely, Karl, is there's a little story, a little bit of context here. So we launched in 2017, and another really big mental health campaign launched in 2017 as well, which was William and Harry's Heads Together. And when they launched, so we've all got to get talking about mental health. And I remembered thinking, well, would you credit it? You know, I start an organization and William and Harry start one at the same time. And will I have a job to do at the other end of this? But actually, what often happens, and you know, sometimes I show a clip of ITV launching Get Britain Talking, where they say we're going to give everybody, we're going to be silent so that you can talk about mental health. And when you say that, right, let's talk about mental health, quite often there's a bit of a silence, because actually when it's a bit intimidating for people sometimes. I'm not sure people always know how to start that conversation, are necessarily comfortable talking about mental health, because it's not something we've traditionally done, certainly not within our culture, within our society. But I think globally it's a subject that isn't massively spoken about. And I really like the way you couch that question, actually, because mental health is not to be confused with mental illness. And actually declining mental health that's moving towards diagnosable mental ill health obviously is something that's of concern to us. But if we think about just health and we think about physical health, quite often that's a much easier conversation to have. If we notice someone, like if I hear a bang in the house and one of my kids starts crying, and I go, and what's the matter? I've hurt my knee. There's pain in my knee. That's a comfortable conversation, and something that we can quite easily articulate, and something we're highly attuned to as human beings. But when the subject's mental health, it tends to be, the response you would tend to get is, yeah, I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. There's that air of discomfort around talking about it, don't you think?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think when the reality is that what's the population of the UK? It's 60 to 70 million people.
Yeah.
So that I think there's 60 to 70 million people in the UK who can be helping each other.
Yeah.
In helping us all to stay that little bit more healthy with regards to our mental health.
Yeah.
And it's so it's a, if you like, loads and loads of actions in the really small, rather than waiting till it's some big issue.
Yeah.
And if we all learn some sort of simple strategies of looking after ourselves and being open to help, encourage, nudge, and look after each other, then I think we're in a better place to reverse that trend. As you say, there is a decline in mental health.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's between us all to work together to address that decline and turn it around towards more positive. And there's some very simple strategies that each of us can take with each other, regardless of age, really.
Yeah. So this event is being pointed towards, I think it's going to be an open access event. So I think people from any age category will be able to access the information. But it's being aimed at people over the age of 60. I asked you your age before we pressed record. We're both around the 50 mark. I think that's probably the right way to say it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
So we don't quite have that over 60 frame of reference yet, though I know certainly the last year, the sorts of things around the COVID pandemic that would maybe be influencing my mental health. I'd be thinking about getting towards that higher risk category from the actual illness itself. Talking Freely hasn't worked directly with the over 60s in the last year. We have people who are over 60 come to our events, but Karl, do you have any experience of working with people who are of that sort of generation, and what are the sort of challenges you think they've faced with regard to their mental health?
Well, yeah, it's definitely lots of experience, and I think the experience is actually similar to people of other ages. It to help people know fundamentally that they are loved.
Yeah.
I mean, sadly, I've met through the work in the church and with the food bank, people who've got quite late in life, relationships have broken down. Maybe their significant marriage relationship or a significant relationship has broken down after, it might have been decades, very very sadly, and it leaves people not just cut adrift because that relationship has broken down, but it leaves people really without this fundamental knowledge that as a human being they are loved. And what we find in the through our work as a church is starting with people to help them know that the fact that they are living and breathing, they have intrinsic value. They have intrinsic value to themselves and to society, to the whole cosmos, if you like.
Yeah.
And we want to help people to know that. I mean, from the church perspective, because our faith, we want to help people to connect spiritually. And I think, in my understanding, my frame of reference, mental health and spirituality interlink quite closely.
Yeah.
I can't say exactly what the exact relationship is between them, but they definitely connect. They definitely connect. And so just reminding people of simple strategies to remind themselves that they are a valid and welcome and valuable part of a bigger something.
Yeah.
Is a great place to start.
Yeah. So, I mean, that connection there, scientifically, it's been shown that having faith or spirituality generally can help to improve our personal sense of wellness and well-being. I think it's valuable to make a distinction, because not everybody will have a faith or a
Sure.
religious belief, but spirituality isn't always centered around a religious belief. It can be something as simple as maybe getting out into nature and just spending time being more thoughtful, more in the moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, things that might have impacted on particularly people over 60, probably more so than younger people, is isolation. I think from family, from loved ones, from grandchildren. There's greater density of the population who have had to shield completely. I know my parents have been shut away for a year now, and I think as we start to come through this and out the other end, I think there's an important part for all of us as a community to understand that after all that time, it might not be as simple as just opening the door and running out again. There's likely to be potentially a lot of anxiety in reconnecting.
Yeah, well, I've already seen this in my own mother.
Yes.
So she falls well into that age bracket. We and my brothers nurtured her through this kind of re-entry into everyday life, like just going to the supermarket.
Yeah.
Suddenly seems a unscalable hurdle.
Yeah.
But we overcome it by saying, well, we'll go with you to the supermarket on the first couple of occasions, and that was just enough to restore confidence. But it was exactly what you say, a simple everyday task.
Yeah.
Because it had been kind of absent for a year and surrounded by media stuff and bad news and all the rest of it, suddenly psychologically seemed like a barrier. But I think the answer is it's the buddy principle. Just walk alongside with people to restore confidence, but in a releasing way, walk alongside them so that they can then do it for themselves in full confidence.
So I was chatting about this earlier to somebody else. You know, my thing, you know, it's in the name of my organization, Talking Freely. The reason that I'm so invested in talking is 15 years ago, when I had problems with my mental health that went down to mental illness, I had to go back to work, and I had to talk about what had happened because people were asking me, and I wasn't brave enough to tell them to mind their own business. And you know, I'm not a liar, so you know, I couldn't tell people lies either. So I had to have those conversations, and when I had them, they're actually really, really positive. And I thought we need more of these conversations. If I'd had these conversations sooner, I don't think I'd have gone from declining mental health into mental illness, or I might not have gone as far into it. You know, I might have been able to take action sooner and stop that decline. So I think talking is really, really important. But here's the thing: if you're isolated, if you're lonely, or if you're just not comfortable talking to the people within your social groups, because we have to accept that not everybody is the right person to have a conversation with mental health about. Not everybody is tuned into it yet. Not everybody receives people the same way. And sometimes, you know, it just doesn't yet feel comfortable having those conversations. Where can those people go for that type of support? So I know Talking Freely aren't a therapy service, so we've not had things like a phone line or that sort of thing in place. When restrictions open, we will hold events again, and we will have volunteers at our events so people can come and have a chat, and our volunteers are out in the community as well. But you know, what sort of things is Food Bank somewhere where people can come and have that chat, Carl?
Well, eventually, when Food Bank is having its full distribution sessions, where we're distributing food, but also have coffee and tea on tap and biscuits on tap as well. We always said that if people just want to come and talk, we are open for that. You know, people don't need to have a voucher for the food parcel. They can just turn up and say, is it all right to just have a coffee and a chat, and our volunteers will sit down and chat with them. That is open. And also the various activities in the churches. I mean, Countess Free Church runs different stuff. All the other churches do as well. What I would say about those is that the key is they are loving, supportive environments. Yeah. They are communities of people. Certainly, I'll speak for Countess Free Church. It's a community of people who are basically for others in the community. You know, we have three big things as a church. Fundamentally, the members of a church are people who have faith in Jesus and follow Jesus. You know, there's a clue in the name church there for that. The second big thing is that those people don't just do it in isolation. They do it together. So they are for each other in their faith in Jesus. But it doesn't stop there. The third big thing is they're not just for their faith in Jesus and for each other, but they're also for the community. So we try and be open and be available for people in the community in all kinds of ways, in a open and generous attitude. And I would say that for anyone who, as you say, you know, they've just not been in that place where mental health was talked about, or they didn't have the language for it, or it was a kind of a taboo. Maybe they can remember members of their family who had difficulty, and other members of the family just said, oh, you know, there's that relative. But, you know, it was clear that relative was not talked about.
Yes.
I'm sure many families have, many older people have memories of that kind of scenario. You know, if that's if that's where you've come from, I can understand that. So find a loving, affirming community where you can start to realize that it's the phrase we use, it's okay to not be okay,
Yeah.
and to start to talk about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And what I'd add to that is a lot of people, particularly those who've been shielding, may have been supported by volunteers. I know that, well, one, I think by virtue of volunteering, you know, that it says a lot about the person and you know, their value set. But I know that on top of that, we've Talking Freely have I've done quite a lot of work with a number of volunteers from a huge number of different voluntary organisations to help them around their knowledge of mental health and to give them hopefully some skills and confidence around having those conversations. So if I'd say, you know, people who are isolated, you know, if they're really scratching their head about who to speak to, there are lots of people. And what I'd say is, back in 2008, when I went back to work and I was having a conversation about mental health, that was a lottery. You know, I really didn't know how that would be received. And, you know, I was writing about it the other day and I'm like, I hit the lottery first time, because if it had a bad experience, I don't know whether Talking Freely would be around.
Sure, yeah.
Fortunately, I had a good experience. These days, I think the odds are stacked more towards having a positive experience. I think if you're not feeling good, and you know, I think if you can feel more confident about being vulnerable and being well received, because I think the odds work more in your favor. And ultimately, you know, if you are struggling, there are people like Talking Freely, like the Countess, like Ely Food Bank, or Mind, or all sorts of places where you can have those conversations.
Yeah.
I think it'd be remiss, Karl, in any conversation about mental health, although we've talked about mental health not being mental illness, to say for people who really feel that they are really struggling, there's lots of things you can do to access professional support as well. So, you know, there are charity organisations like the Samaritans, but people should also think about talking to their GPs. In this area, there's a great service. If you dial 111, option 2 takes you straight through to a mental health professional. So if you're in a mental health crisis, that is a fantastic service in this area. And lots of other stuff that if people want to contact me or you, I'm sure we both, well, between us, have a number of different resources and organisations we can signpost people towards.
Absolutely. On our webpage, countessfree.co.uk, just go to the contact us. There's a form there. You can ping us an email. But our door effectively is always open. Even through the hardest of lockdowns, our building has never been completely shut.
Yeah.
And certainly as a church, we have been operating fully as a body of people for the last 12 months. Nothing's changed in that regard. And as we come out of lockdown, that won't change because we never shut in the first place.
So, Karl, someone's approach, you know, we've talked a lot about the person who opening up about mental health. On the flip side of that, we're the listeners now. You know, you and I are both professional listeners, and you know, I would say, I mean, I'm definitely a better talker than a listener, but I've invested in my listening skills. What advice would you give to someone who wants to talk and wants to listen, and isn't quite sure how to go about that? What would be your one pearl of wisdom?
Don't jump to conclusions.
Yeah.
That's my pearl. Listen carefully. Pinch yourself to stop your mind racing ahead of what the person is saying, because they can get partway through their spiel and you're already projecting forward to X, Y, or Z. You've got to pinch yourself and say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep listening carefully to what they are saying, and do my best to understand really where they are coming from. Avoid saying things like, I understand where you're coming from, because unless you really do, I mean, it may be you do, you know, but I mean, it's like if someone says to me, you know, a great one for me would be, I had a miscarriage, right? Back in the day, say 5 years ago or 3 years ago, there is no way I can say I understand where you're coming from, because I'm a bloke, right? So let's not pretend that we do understand. I mean, sometimes people will share stuff, and I really have been in a comparable situation or equivalent situation, but in many cases, the best we can muster, and let's be honest, we are limited, finite human beings. The best we can muster is I can start to imagine some of the feelings that might have created for you, and try and travel with them. But for us, yeah, as we try and listen in that way, for us at the church, we have our own grounding to know that we ourselves are loved, and this person is loved too. So that if you know, like a sailing boat has a big keel, is it the keel thing underneath? But
might be.
Well, I don't know why I'm talking about sailing boats. I haven't got a clue, but it's the thing that when the wind's blowing on, it stops it from just flapping right over.
Right.
For us, our faith is that stabilizer. There's a better word. Stabilizer that just stops us blowing over with it. So have your grounding that keeps the stabilizers on your life. That will enable you to be a better listener. With a person who's sharing stuff, but you quite possibly have no idea about, but you can listen.
So I mean, a couple of things I pick out there, completely agree with all of it, is, you know, maybe saying the same thing but in a different way, is don't try and fix it. Don't try and fix it, just listen. Empathize. Empathy is a really big word, but and then, you know, the other thing is it isn't, if you're listening, it's not about you. So we often, you know, in some of the work I do, we talk about you know, even if you do have a comparable situation, it can be quite difficult to present that in a way that's empathetic during a conversation. You know, it can come across as, you have to be very mindful of how that might come across. You know, if you're trying to come from a place of empathy, but it can sometimes be seen as diminishing what the person says. I know, you know, quite often some of the conversations I had, I have generalized anxiety disorder, which is, you know, is really unpleasant. When I'm very, very anxious, I have this real sense of something terrible happening. But the experience of anxiety is common in human beings. So we all have a frame of reference for anxiety, or we should have, because we've all felt anxious, but it isn't the same. So I would hear a lot, oh, everyone feels like that, Tony. And then I'd think, well, then I should really be getting on with it. You know, why can't I cope? If everyone feels like that, why is it that I'm here? And actually, everyone doesn't feel like that. Everyone has a frame of reference for anxiety, but my experience of it is unique to me. And I think it's very, very important when we have a conversation and when we're listening, that the listening is we're listening to the person and we're validating their experience and not making it about ourselves and not trying to fix it. Great video online by Brené Brown about empathy, you know, really sort of captures the essence of that. And so then I suppose really the final thing to say is, if, you know, people are really interested in learning about talking freely about mental health, or you know, supporting our community to have these conversations, then they can get in touch with me. And I'm guessing, Karl, you're as open to people getting in touch with you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We both run community interest organizations or charities. We're always looking for help, aren't we?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Karl, really, really interesting to chat to you. And, you know, particularly as well, I think to get the spiritual aspect as well, it's so important. And hopefully everyone who's watching us can take something from it. And, you know, I hope they've enjoyed the video, and I hope they enjoy the day. And best of luck in the coming year, as hopefully we start to move, you know, away from these really unusual months that we've just had.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been good to chat these things through and explore with you. So thank you.
And I will come along to Food Bank and have a coffee with you when it reopens. I didn't
Sure.
know do that. Come and have a coffee and a chat. I'd love to. So
yeah,
cool. Thanks a lot, Karl.
okay.